before I begin my speech tonight, this is for interrupters. It is a water gun during my speech tonight. Are we clear?
Sir, yes, sir.
All right. We have a water gun. Please silence your phones. I want you to pay attention tonight. Make sure your phones are quiet. Last thing, I will take maybe one or two questions at the end of my speech. There will be time for questions then. How many of you are afraid of flying in a plane? Anybody afraid of flying? Anybody afraid of the dark? How about snakes? Afraid of the dark? Snakes, a little bit. Okay, most people were afraid of snakes.
Rafaela, I thought this was about your essential oils. Is that not the speech tonight?
That's not the speech tonight, but you've reminded me about something, how much I love the oils, and I do plan on doing another speech,
Oh, okay.
maybe in a month or two, because I do love it. Thanks for reminding me about
Okay.
that. When you are public speaking, we have found that in fact, it is one of the most common fears that all of us have. Or most of us, not everybody, but most of us are afraid of public speaking. Why is that? Start asking yourself, what defines your fear? The quiddity of preparing for a speech comes from preparation. I want to give you a story about when I first started with Toastmasters a couple of years ago. When I first started, I didn't want to introduce myself. I didn't want to have to stand up and say my name. I didn't want to have to do anything at all that had to do with me standing up and speaking in front of a club or anything of that nature. But one of the things I learned to do was to prepare for my speech. One of the things you can do when you start preparing for your speech is to make sure that you're saying your speech out loud, that you're saying your speech in front of a camera so you can watch the video come back. Chris, what are some of the things that you have done when you have to prepare for a speech? What is one of the things you do to practice?
I write it down and then I say it out loud.
Thank you, Chris, that's great. And Heidi, what are some of the things that you do to get your speech prepared when you have to speak publicly?
Practice.
Practicing is fantastic. And remember, there's many ways you can practice. You can practice with your spouse. You can practice with a friend. Here at Toastmasters, we also have mentors that will help you when you're having to give your speech and practice and get ready. When I first started at the Westfield Toastmasters, again, I didn't want to say my name, didn't want to introduce myself. One of the things that helped me was just being in the club. Just being in Toastmasters was so helpful. And then I realized that's what all the roles are for. When we have to stand up and introduce yourselves, how many of you were scared? How many of you were terrified of actually having to stand up and you just say your name? Was that uncomfortable? Yes, it's uncomfortable. So the more times that you get to say your name, the more times you volunteer to be timer, or you volunteer to be the Toastmaster. Chris alluded to that tonight. If you want to try something, this is the place to do it. It's a great learning environment and a great place to practice your public speaking. Tonight I want to talk to you about how to get rid of your fear, and let's look at the theme tonight. The theme tonight is to communicate is to evolve. Thank you so much. This speech is awesome. Oh, let's give a round of applause to Stephanie for contributing to our meeting. That's fantastic. One of my favorite quotes when it talks about communicating is to evolve, one of my favorite quotes is George Bernard Shaw, who says the weirdest thing about communication is the illusion that it actually happened. That's why speaking and being in Toastmasters is so important. Learn to speak, learn to communicate, learn to say what it is you want to say. Just another reminder, we do pass around a sheet for you to sign up for roles. It's imperative that you sign up for roles to help you. Every time you give a speech, when you're practicing and preparing a speech, every time you give a speech, you learn something else about yourself. You won't know it until after you've received your evaluation, you go home, you sit down and you think, what about that speech was great? What could I work on? Your evaluator will give you things that you can work on, but you can take it even further than that. Mary, did you want to share with all of us on some of the things you do to practice to make sure you give a good speech?
I stand in front of the mirror and practice.
That is an excellent point. In front of the mirror, you can see your hands doing this or that. Before I close, is there any other question about the speech or public speaking and preparing, anything about the fear? Any questions? To conclude, the 3 things that you can do to make you a better public speaker is prepare, prepare, prepare. Practice in front of a mirror, practice in front of a video camera. Second, for every 1 minute of your speech, a good measure is 1 hour of practice for that 1 minute. It's a 4-minute speech. Make sure you practice for 4 hours. Each minute, it's very helpful. And then the third thing, again, is to receive feedback prior to arriving at the Toastmasters club to present your speech. The quiddity of your performance is dependent on your practice. Mr. Toastmaster.